Hey, I want to take a little time today and address a couple of subjects here. I'm going to cover a couple of things in one video. And they all kind of revolve around two things: Patreon and that Sargon of Akkad, I believe I'm pronouncing that right, maybe not, guy from YouTube. As a lot of you probably already know, Sargon of Akkad got kicked off of Patreon. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, he didn't do nothing and they just kicked him off because they don't like what he said. So, I looked into it and he didn't do nothing. He did something very specific, and I understand why Patreon made the decision they made. They are a private platform. They have a right to not be associated with whoever they don't want to be associated with. Now, was it right for them to be throwing him off of Patreon? Was it right for them to dissociate themselves? Because just because something is your right doesn't mean it's the right thing to do, and I'll discuss that here in this video. But first, let's talk about what Sargon of Akkad did. He went on a rant where I actually am kind of in support of the idea behind his rant, the point he was trying to make, because he was saying that the people of the alt-right are behaving every bit as badly as the people that they say are the worst thing that ever happened to America. They're racist. They don't like black people. They love to call black people the N-word, and he was pointing out that they behave like white N-words. Now, the N-word, I don't even like saying the N-word because I think it gives the word too much power. I think when you're speaking clinically, you should just say the word nigger because you're not using it as a derogatory term. I think that's the only time white people can use that word, is when they are pointing out the racial injustice of the word, the historic importance of the word, or looking at it clinically and saying, this is a word that belongs to black people only, and that we cannot use it in any type of casual or derogatory way, period. Now, I know a lot of people might disagree with that. Go, it's a double standard. No, it isn't. It isn't a double standard. This is a very hateful word that was used to degrade and dehumanize a certain class of people for a very long time, and we lost the right to use it because of that. That is their word now. That word belongs to the black community in any form outside, like I said, of a clinical or historical debate. We can't use it casually, and we definitely can't use it as a derogatory term. Now, Sargon of Akkad used it as a derogatory term towards the people of the alt-right. Now, I will give him the benefit of the doubt and say he was trying to make a point. He was trying to say that you are as bad as what you say the stereotype behind that word is. You are demonizing an entire group of people for something they didn't do and for something that isn't true. And by doing so, you are actually worse than what you're accusing them of being. And I get that, and I understand that. But his choice to use that word is not justifiable. It is not defensible. I will stand and say I defend the principle of what he was saying, but I will not defend his use of that word. If I was in any way associated with this guy, I would say, listen, I know what he was trying to say, and I understand his point, and I agree with his point, but he made a very poor choice of terms, and I will not defend those. And if he will not apologize for that, I will not defend him or support him. So I can understand where Patreon said, we don't want to be associated with him, because I wouldn't be associated with him if he did not apologize for that. Now, a lot of people are like, they're violating his rights and blah, blah, blah. It's not his right to make money off Patreon. Patreon isn't making him stop doing videos or suppressing his speech at all. They're just saying, we don't want our platform associated with you. When we work with a client, that is a customer and a client relationship between the two of us, and we don't want you as a client. And I agree totally that that is their right. Now, should they have? Is it the right thing to do? I don't know. But is it good for business? It could be good for their business in the long run, because I think they have an end game here, and I'll discuss their end game in a second. So as far as Sargon of Akkad is concerned, he didn't do nothing, like some people say. He did something that was a very poor choice of words. He did something that was a very poor choice, period. And he used a very poor choice in wording. Regardless of what his point was, he still violated decency by using that word. So I am going to have to say, I can understand where Patreon disassociated with themselves with him for doing that. Now, I haven't looked and seen if he's apologized for that since then. Maybe he has, maybe he hasn't, but that's beside the point. So now let's talk about Patreon and people saying, well, I'm just going to leave Patreon and that'll teach them. Well, here's the thing. The people like me and you that are saying, we're going to boycott Patreon, I guarantee you we're less than 0.5% of their income. We are probably, no more than a statistical rounding error to them. They're not going to lose a lot of money because of us. They're part of a multinational corporation. They're billionaires that own this thing and other things too. So even if Patreon completely failed, they just move on to their next thing or absorb it into their other companies. So we're not hurting Patreon at all. So if you think you're hurting Patreon by boycotting the channels you support, like Tim's channel, etc., you're not hurting Patreon, you're hurting Tim's channel. You're hurting Mr. Guns and Gear's channel. You're making it hard for them to stay online, which means you're helping the anti-gunners. Patreon didn't do anything that was anti-gun. They didn't even do anything, in my opinion, as anti-decent or anti-First Amendment or anything like that. They just made a business decision that we may or may not agree with, but they had every right to make. So you're not hurting them, because, like I said, we're such a small fraction of their income, but you're every bit of the income for a lot of gun channels now. Like the gun channels that are actually still being able to stay on the air and still do what they do, it's because of Patreon. That's why. There's no other platform that can do what Patreon can do. Now people are saying, move to another platform. That ain't going to work, because that other platform doesn't exist. There are other smaller platforms, but a lot of the gun channels that have tried to move to them recently, one, they notice nobody's signing up on them. And two, they're getting letters like, I believe, Military Arms Channel and some other people got saying, hey, guess what? You know that what we told we were going to do and how we were going to replace Patreon? Well, we can't do that because it turns out we don't have the right agreements with PayPal or Visa. We can take donations, we just can't pay you. So that's not viable. When you're trying to run a gun channel and you're living from, paycheck to paycheck to fund that gun channel, that doesn't work. So by boycotting Patreon, you're not making some grand political statement, and you're not, because what are you making the statement against? The right of a company to not be associated with someone who made racist statements? I'm not going to try to harm a company for that. Just make me look bad. So you're not hurting Patreon in any way, but you are hurting the channels you support. Luckily, my channel doesn't run on donations. My donations go to give away guns and give away toys to kids at Christmas, etc. So my channel can continue, just may not be able to do the giving away guns and stuff. But some channels won't even be able to continue. And this is where I get to that little, I think they got an ulterior motive. I think Patreon's trying to keep it in the news and try to keep it going because they want people that support gun channels, etc. to disappear. Because if they leave the platform, well, then they'll be able to just say, yeah, we just did away with all gun channels because just nobody was supporting them. Just purely a financial decision, not a biased or anti-Second Amendment decision. Just nobody was supporting them. And then where are we going to be? Most of the most vocal and effective voices for the Second Amendment will be silenced because you tried to take a moral stand against something that didn't need a moral stand against. Most of the people that are infuriated by the Sargon of Akkad thing should be saying, I know what you're trying to say, but you should apologize for the way you said it. And then maybe things would be different. Like I said, maybe he has since then, maybe he hasn't. I didn't check into whether he's tried to make it right. I just checked into what he did. So you're not hurting Patreon. He didn't do nothing. He did do something. He did something that was very poor judgment. And that came across as very racist. Whether he meant it as racist or not, just using the term in the way he used it as a derogatory term very casually, it was very racist. Whether his intent was racist or not, and he should apologize for that. I would apologize for that if I was racist in a derogatory way. And believe me, I've said controversial things before. I called Colin Noir and Uncle Tom one time. And a lot of people thought that was racist. And I said, hey, I'm sorry if you think this is racist. I'm sorry, the word Uncle Tom is not the same as the other word. It's a literary reference. But if I offended you, I'm sorry. And if any black people are offended, I'll apologize to them personally. But at least I haven't seen him even do that. So I understand saying something controversial. Believe me, I say lots of stupid shit all the time. But boycotting Patreon, you're not making any grand statement. And are you hurting Patreon? No. Are you supporting Sargon of Akkad? No, not really. Because a real supporter of him would want him to do the right thing, I believe. And I know how he's upset. I mean, he's got like 1 million subscriber channel almost. So he's probably making, because it goes up exponentially when you get above like 500,000 subscribers, the average income. So I guarantee you he's making $30,000, $40,000 a month off Patreon. So I can understand where he's upset that he got kicked off the platform. But I'm sure he'll rebound and find some other way to fundraise off this. He's getting a lot of support. But the other people that are getting hurt by this, he's not being hurt by it so much. It's the people on the sidelines, the Mr. Guns and Gears, the military arms channels, the gun websites, the Never Enough Ammos, etc. Those are the ones that are being hurt. Because when you pull your money out of Patreon, you're taking a penny from them, but you're taking everything from those channels. So my advice to people out there is, one, pay a little bit closer attention when you say someone didn't do nothing, because he did do something. Also, evaluate your stances on things. Do you want to be seen as supporting someone who did something racist, or do you want to say, I support their principle, but let's get an apology out of them for the wording they used? And three, when you decide to take your money out of something, realize who you're hurting. Like I said, because you're not hurting Patreon, you're really hurting the people you supposedly support. So, I'm sorry. I would not pull my $2 from a platform simply because I think they made a bad decision, when I know I'm only taking 5 cents from them, but I'm taking $1.95 from someone I think is doing something very important. Maintaining a visible presence for the Second Amendment on the internet, in social media, going to capitals, doing the fight, doing the things you need to do to fight for our rights, supporting the GOA, advertising new gun products for the industry, etc. That's what you're hurting when you're boycotting Patreon right now. Maybe in the future there'll be another platform we can go to, but right now that just isn't the case. None of them are actually viable. Believe me, a lot of us have looked into them. They all have one hitch or another that makes them not work well. So, you make up your own minds what you want to do. You make up your own minds what you think about what Sargon of Akkad did. But realize, if you decide to stop supporting Patreon, you're not hurting Patreon. You're hurting the people you support, like I said. And you can say, well, I'm going to donate to them through PayPal or something else, or go to their channel and do Super Chats. Well, that takes part of their money away, because those things take way bigger chunks, especially Super Chats. And plus, it's not consolidated in one place. People don't really follow through on it. In fact, I've had like 20 people tell me, I'm canceling my Patreon and signing up with PayPal. And I've had 20 people this month cancel my Patreon. And you know how many of them have signed up on PayPal? 1. So I think a lot of people are just using this as an excuse to be cheap. But that's no surprise in the gun community. But like I said, just pay attention to what you're doing and understand the repercussions of your actions. Because sometimes you're standing up for the wrong reasons, and you're not hurting the people you want to hurt. You're hurting the people that you least want to hurt.